Welcome to Twilight Tale, where history drifts gently into dreams. Tonight, we journey back to ancient Rome, to a monument that has watched centuries rise and fall, the Colosseum. As you settle in and let the world grow quiet, allow this story to guide you into a peaceful state of mind. We'll explore the hidden secrets, forgotten details, and the timeless architecture that helped shape one of the world's greatest wonders. So take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and let your imagination walk through ancient corridors as we begin the Colosseum, secrets behind its timeless architecture. The last sliver of Roman sunlight, the kind that paints ancient stones in hues of forgotten glory and whispers promises of secrets, was slowly bleeding out of the sky. It kissed the western face of the Flavian amphitheater, the Colosseum as the world knew it, dusting its pockmarked arches and towering remnants with a fleeting gold. Below, the eternal city hummed its daily farewell, a symphony of Vespas fading into the distant murmur of dinner conversations. But here, before the colossal ruin, a different kind of quiet was settling in. Old man Elias Vance, a scholar with more dust on his tweed jacket than years in his passport, stood perfectly still. He wasn't a tourist in the usual sense, snapping photos and ticking off sites. Elias was a listener. He believed places, especially those as old and grand as this one, had memories that resonated in their very foundations, if only you knew how to tune in. His hair, what little remained, was a distinguished silver, and his eyes, behind spectacles perched on the bridge of his nose, held the patient, knowing glint of someone who'd spent a lifetime digging into the earth for truths. He'd traveled halfway across the Atlantic, not for a tour, but for an audience. The Colosseum loomed before him, a giant awakened by the encroaching twilight. It wasn't just a building, it was a mountain carved by forgotten hands, a titan brought low by time and earthquakes, yet still radiating an undeniable, profound power. Its outer shell, mostly gone, revealed the intricate honeycomb of its inner workings, a labyrinth of brick and mortar that once held a world. Elias imagined it not as a ruin, but as a silent, ancient entity, its massive body slowly cooling after a day under the Roman sun. As the last light faded, replaced by the bruised purples and deep indigos of dusk, the temperature dropped, and a breeze, cool and dry, began to thread its way through the gaping arches. It wasn't just any wind. Elias felt it distinctly. It was a breath, a sigh perhaps, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible hum. It was the sound of millions of stories, of cheers and roars, of whispers and prayers, all trapped within the very fabric of the stone, vibrating with a longing to be heard again. "They say walls have ears," Elias murmured, more to himself than anyone, his voice a low rumble. "But I reckon these walls, they have a voice." He shifted his weight, pulling his worn trench coat tighter around him. The tourist crowds had thinned to a mere trickle, replaced by the occasional local dog walker or a lone, hopeful street vendor packing up for the night. The immense structure, so vibrant and bustling by day, now felt watchful. Every darkened archway seemed to be an eye, every shadow a memory stretching. It was a safe kind of spooky, like a beloved ghost story whispered by a warm fire, full of wonder and a little shiver, but ultimately inviting. He walked closer, his leather-soled shoes crunching softly on the gravel path. The sheer scale of the place was humbling, almost suffocating. How many souls had passed through these very gates? How many grand spectacles had unfolded within its oval embrace? The wind, now a little stronger, seemed to carry more than just dust. It brought a faint echo, a vibrant, long-lost past stirring from its slumber. It wasn't loud, not a shout, but a soft, insistent murmur, like the turning of a page in an impossibly old book. Elias stopped, directly in front of one of the crumbling yet still mighty entrances. He closed his eyes, tilting his head just slightly, letting the wind comb through his thin hair. He didn't need to see to know what was there. He needed to feel. And what he felt was a distinct pull, a sensation that the Colosseum wasn't just silent stone, but a slumbering beast, stirring from an age-old sleep. It was ready to share its secrets. All it asked was that someone, anyone, would finally listen closely. The murmurs Elias felt weren't just the wind. They were whispers from the deep past, a sudden shift in the air, as if the very ground beneath his feet had decided to turn a page. The Colosseum, in that moment, stopped being a silent ruin and became a colossal storybook, its heavy, ancient cover just creaking open. And the first tale it had to tell wasn't of cheers or gladiators, but of ashes, ambition, and a promise carved in stone. Close your eyes with Elias, if you will, and imagine a Rome unlike the one you see today. Picture a city not of marble and grandeur, but of charred timber and smoking ruins. It was the year 64 AD, and the Great Fire had swept through, a ravenous monster devouring everything in its path. For days, the inferno raged, leaving behind a scarred, heartbroken populace and a landscape of desolation. The air hung thick with soot and despair, and the people, those who hadn't lost everything, wandered through the rubble, their eyes wide with fear and grief. This wasn't just a fire. It was the extinguishing of a city's spirit, a wound so deep it seemed it might never heal. But even amidst such tragedy, human folly and outright greed sometimes finds its most fertile ground. While the poor huddled in makeshift shelters, trying to salvage what little they had, the reigning emperor, Nero, began a project that would forever brand him a villain in the hearts of his people. On the vast swaths of land cleared by the fire, where homes and temples once stood, Nero didn't build for the people. Oh no, he built for himself. He raised the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a sprawling, opulent palace complex so vast it seemed to consume half of Rome. It boasted golden ceilings, gem-encrusted walls, rotating dining rooms, and at its heart, a colossal artificial lake shimmering under the Roman sun. The audacity of it, the sheer, unadulterated selfishness was breathtaking. Imagine the whispering resentment, the bitter glances from those who had lost everything as they watched golden tiles being laid and exotic gardens bloom on their former homes. It was a slap in the face, a monstrous monument to one man's ego built on the ashes of collective sorrow. The Colossus of Nero, a giant bronze statue of the emperor himself, stood proudly at the entrance, a beacon of his self-love, casting a long, arrogant shadow over a city still grieving. The decades that followed Nero's reign were turbulent, a whirlwind of short-lived emperors and civil strife. Rome, battered and bruised, yearned for stability, for a leader who understood the beat of its weary heart. And then he arrived, Vespasian. He wasn't bored into royalty. He was a plain-speaking, down-to-earth general, a man who rose through the ranks, his hands calloused from honest work, his eyes clear with practical wisdom. He saw the scars Nero had left, not just on the land, but on the Roman soul. He understood that a people needed more than just food and shelter. They needed hope. They needed a symbol that Rome, the eternal city, could rise again, stronger and more glorious than before. And so Vespasian made a promise, a grand, audacious promise. He would tear down the Golden House, dismantle Nero's ego-driven monstrosity, and reclaim the land for the people. But he wouldn't just give it back. He would build something for them, something that would erase the bitter memory of Nero's extravagance. He envisioned an amphitheater, not just any amphitheater, but the greatest ever conceived. A place where every Roman, from the lowliest citizen to the highest senator, could gather, witness spectacles, and feel a part of something magnificent, something truly Roman. And where would this grand monument stand? Why, right in the very heart of Nero's arrogance, on the drained bed of that artificial lake, beneath the shadow of the colossal Nero statue, which would be repurposed, its head replaced with that of the sun god, Sol. It was a defiant act, a powerful statement. From the ashes of greed, a monument of generosity would rise. But such promises, whispered Elias's guiding wind, are not made without immense cost. The task was gargantuan, an engineering feat that stretched the very limits of Roman ingenuity. First, the lake had to be drained, a vast, deep basin filled with water and, perhaps, with forgotten remnants of Nero's hidden excesses or even older secrets stirred from the earth. Imagine the thousands of laborers, the relentless toil, digging trenches, diverting streams, channeling the water away, revealing the dark, muddy floor where fish once swam. What secrets might have been unearthed from that mucky bottom? What ancient treasures, or perhaps forgotten terrors, might have slumbered beneath those still waters, only to be disturbed by the relentless march of progress? The construction was a marvel, yes, but also a disturbance, a massive shifting of earth and history that perhaps awakened something that preferred to stay forgotten. And that, the wind seemed to murmur, was where the real secrets began to stir. And stir they did, deep beneath the surface, where Emperor Vespasian's grand ambition first clawed its way into the earth. If you could have stood there, back when the heart of Rome pulsed with the raw energy of creation, you wouldn't have heard whispers right away. No, you'd have felt the ground tremble beneath your feet, a low, constant vibration, like the hum of a colossal, ancient beast awakening. This wasn't just dirt they were moving. This was history, layers of it, sediment from a forgotten lake, the undisturbed sleep of centuries. Imagine it, thousands upon thousands of hands, rough and calloused, digging into that reclaimed lake bed. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and sweat, echoed with the rhythmic thud of pickaxes, the scrape of shovels, and the grunt of men straining under the weight of enormous baskets overflowing with muddy clay. They dug, and then they dug some more, until the pit for the Colosseum's foundation was a staggering sight, nearly 30 feet deep, a monstrous oval trench stretching for hundreds of yards. It was a wound in the earth, a gash cut clean through the memory of Nero's golden house, through the very fabric of the city's past. The Roman engineers, bless their clever, calculating hearts, knew that simply building on an old lake bed was asking for trouble. Water, even ancient, dried-up water, has a way of remembering where it once belonged. So they didn't just dig, they secured. They laid a colossal ring of concrete, not the stuff you see on modern sidewalks, mind you, but a volcanic marvel. They mixed crushed tough rock, lime, and a special ash called pozzolana, dredged from the volcanic soil of nearby Puteoli. This wasn't just any ash, it was an alchemical secret, a gift from the very core of the earth that made their concrete harden not just in the air, but underwater. Imagine that, a material that grew stronger, denser, more resilient, the more it mingled with moisture. And mingle it did. As they poured this liquid stone into the deep trenches, the old lake bed seemed to sigh, exhaling long-held dampness. The ground, disturbed from its quiet slumber, yielded its secrets piece by slow, oozing piece. Bits of ancient pottery, forgotten tools from earlier settlements, even the occasional bone, Not human, usually, but sometimes a worker would pause, pick up a smoothed, water-worn fragment, and feel a shiver tracing up his spine. It was just an animal, they'd tell themselves, but the chill lingered. The Colosseum, even at this foundational stage, was built on top of ghosts, on top of disturbed peace. Once the concrete settled, forming a solid, unyielding bed, came the travertine. Oh, the travertine. Great, creamy white blocks of limestone quarried from Tivoli, miles away. Each block, the size of a small cart, was hauled on ox-drawn wagons, slow and ponderous processions that snaked their way into the city, creating an endless, groaning symphony of effort. These weren't just bricks, they were nature's own masterpiece, riddled with tiny holes and imperfections that gave them character, that whispered of the ancient springs and minerals that had formed them over millennia. They were strong, enduring, and when stacked course after course, they began to form a wall so immense, so unshakable, it seemed to grow directly from the bedrock itself. This wasn't just construction, it was an act of monumental will, a defiance of geology and time. The Romans didn't just build on the earth, they built into it, creating a deep, interwoven tapestry of stone and soil. As those first massive tiers of travertine began to rise, slowly but surely, from the concrete foundation, it was less like erecting a building and more like coaxing a mountain into existence. But a mountain with a purpose, a mountain that hummed with the ambition of an emperor and the labor of tens of thousands. The air around the construction site was alive, a cacophony of sound and effort. The ringing of hammers, the shouts of foremen, the creak and groan of immense wooden cranes hoisting the heavy blocks into place, their ropes thick as a man's arm. And beneath it all, a subtle, almost imperceptible thrum, a low vibration from the very ground they had so thoroughly disturbed. It was the earth settling, yes, but some claimed it was something else too. A sigh, a protest, a low, continuous murmur from what lay buried beneath those frightfully strong foundations, sealed away by concrete and stone, waiting for a crack, a tremor, a listening ear to finally tell its chilling, timeless tale. The beauty rising from the ground was undeniable, but the fear, the faint echo of something unsettled, was woven into its very first stones. Now, that low thrum, that whisper from the disturbed earth, it wasn't the only sound that echoed across the valley where Vespasian's grand vision was taking shape. Oh no, that murmur, it was just the bass note in a much larger, more fervent symphony. A symphony of human will, of sweat and grit and sheer, unyielding muscle. For every emperor who dreamed a dream, for every architect who drew a line, there were 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 hands that had to make it real. And believe you me, friend, the Colosseum wasn't built by a handful of fellas on a summer afternoon. No, this was an army, a silent army of stone. They came from every corner of the Roman world, a sprawling multitude of men, and yes, even women and children, whose lives were tethered to the colossal undertaking. Skilled engineers from Alexandria, their minds sharp as the finest steel. Master masons from Greece, their hands coaxing beauty from brute rock. Carpenters from Gaul, whose lumbering frames could heft beams thick as a man's torso. And then there were the countless, the forgotten, the enslaved. Men and women hauled from distant lands, their names stripped away, their freedom forfeit. Their only currency now, the strength in their backs and the relentless rhythm of their labor. Imagine it if you can, the air thick with dust that coated every breath, every pore, the relentless Roman sun beating down, baking the skin, turning the very ground into a griddle. From the quarries of Tivoli, miles and miles away, they brought the travertine, immense blocks of creamy white stone, each weighing more than a wagon load of grain. pulled by oxen, dragged by ropes, floated on barges up the Aniene River, these colossal slabs were a testament to brute force and ingenious logistics. And once they arrived on site, the real dance began. Picture the scene. Thousands upon thousands of figures, moving like ants on a colossal anthill, yet each action precise, directed. Foremen, whip in hand or shouting commands in a half-dozen languages, keeping the pace. The air alive with the clink, clank, clink of chisels against stone, shaping each block to an exact fit. The dull, rhythmic thud of hammers driving pegs into the immense wooden scaffolding that climbed higher and higher, a temporary city built around a city yet to be. The steady creak, groan, whoosh of the great wooden cranes, their massive timbers groaning under the strain as they lifted stones weighing tons, inch by agonizing inch, into their designated slots. The ropes, woven from hemp and flax, were thick as a wrestler's arm, stretched taut, vibrating with the effort. Every brick of concrete poured, every block of travertine set, every arch meticulously placed, represented hours of back-breaking toil. Hands blistered and bled, muscles screamed. Accidents were not just common, they were a daily terror. A slipped foot on a high beam, a snapped rope, a falling block, each could mean a broken bone, a crushed limb, or a swift, anonymous end. Lives were consumed by the hunger of this monumental structure, their bodies buried in unmarked graves, their names whispered only in the brief, hushed prayers of their fellow laborers before the next day's sun demanded their efforts anew. It's said that great buildings have a soul, a spirit woven into their very fabric. And if that's true, then the Colosseum isn't just a testament to Roman genius, it's a silent, stony memorial to the untold sacrifices that built it. Not just the sweat and the muscle, but the dreams left behind, the futures unlived, the sheer raw will to survive infused into every mortar joint, every soaring arch. It's why, even today, when you stand before its ancient walls, you feel more than just history. You feel a presence, a low, continuous hum, not of the earth settling, but of 1,000,000 silent voices forever embedded in the stone. A chorus of the unremembered, their tale etched not in words, but in the very strength and endurance of the Colosseum itself. And perhaps, if you listened close enough, late at night, when the Roman winds whistled through its broken arches, you might hear a sigh, not of protest this time, but of a story waiting patiently to be told. A story of blood and stone, of ambition and despair, forever locked within the heart of Rome. And what a story it was, waiting to unfold. That low hum you might feel, that quiet sigh carried on the Roman wind, it wasn't just the creak of ancient stone or the groan of settling earth. No, friend, it was the Colosseum itself, breathing out centuries of spectacle, of whispers and roars, of dreams made and dreams dashed. It was, in essence, the very memory of a world held fast within its mighty embrace. Imagine it, if you will, rising from the heart of Rome like some colossal, petrified wave. Not just a building, but a mountain sculpted by human hands, its contours echoing the curves of the hills it surveyed. Its true power, its enduring mystery, lay not just in how it was built, but in what those walls were designed to contain. They were more than mere barriers. They were concentric rings of an empire's heartbeat, each tier a testament to a society both grand and brutally stratified. From the outside, it was a masterpiece of 4 grand tiers, each one a visual symphony, guiding the eye upwards, drawing you into its magnetic pull. The lowest tier, standing solid and strong as the very roots of the world, was adorned with the sturdy, no-nonsense Doric columns. These weren't for delicate dances. They were built to take a hit, to bear the immense weight above, to hold the very foundation of the Roman spirit. As your gaze climbed, you'd find the elegant, scroll-topped Ionic columns gracing the second level, a touch of refined grace built upon raw power. Above them, the third tier boasted the ornate, leafy beauty of the Corinthian columns, reaching skyward with a flourish, hinting at the splendor held within. And finally, the highest tier, a parade of Corinthian pilasters, not quite full columns, but symbols of their grandeur, stood guard, their silent vigilance a final flourish before the open sky. Each archway, a gaping maw in the stone, promised passage, entrance into a world unlike any other. But the true magic, the true eeriness, began once you stepped inside. Past those grand entrance arches, you were swallowed by a labyrinth of corridors, a shadowed maze of dark brick and cool stone. The air here was different, heavier, thick with the echoes of long-gone crowds. These weren't just hallways, they were arteries, pumping thousands upon thousands of human beings into the great gaping maw of the arena. Each passage, each turn, each ramp was meticulously designed to filter and guide, a brilliant feat of crowd control that even today's stadiums would envy. Up to 80,000 souls could find their seats in under 15 minutes. Think of that, a roaring river of humanity, all flowing into one basin, yet never bottlenecking. It was a marvel of engineering, yes, but also a testament to the iron grip of Roman organization, a silent whisper of their mastery over logistics, over chaos itself. And then you'd emerge, out of the cool darkness into the sudden, dazzling light of the arena, and the sight of those vast, curving tiers of seats rising like a wave against the blue Roman sky. This was the cavea, the seating area, a vast bowl designed to hold the entire spectrum of Roman society. Not equally, mind you. Oh no. These walls weren't just structural, they were social architecture. Each concentric circle a clear declaration of status, wealth, and power. Closest to the arena floor, where the sand would drink the sweat and blood, sat the emperor himself in the opulent pulvernar, a private box adorned with marble and rich tapestries. Beside him, the Vestal Virgins, revered priestesses, held a place of honor, their pure white robes a stark contrast to the brutal drama unfolding below. Then came the senators, the most powerful men in Rome, their seats wide and comfortable, carved from fine marble, often bearing their names to mark their permanent privilege. Their position wasn't just close to the action, it was a visible statement of their authority, their proximity to the beating heart of the empire. Above them, the equites, the knights, the wealthy businessmen and landowners occupied the next tier. Good seats, mind you, but a subtle step down from the elite. Further up still, the common citizens, the ordinary plebeians, sat on benches that stretched in ever-widening arcs. And at the very top, almost touching the sky, was the highest tier, often wooden benches, reserved for women, foreigners, and slaves. From there, the gladiators below would have been mere specks, the roar of the crowd a distant rumble. It was a physical manifestation of the Roman hierarchy, etched in stone, visible for all to see. These tiers, these walls that held the world, were not just mute observers. They absorbed it all. The frantic cheers, the gasps of horror, the quiet whispers of love notes passed in the shadows, the terrified prayers of those about to die. They collected the collective emotions of an empire, the sheer, raw humanity that filled them day after day. And if you listen closely, not with your ears, but with that part of you that feels ancient things, you might just hear it. That continuous hum, a quiet chorus of 1,000,000 silent voices, forever embedded in the stone, still sighing their story from the heart of Rome. Now, if those ancient, sun-warmed stones of the Colosseum's tears could sigh out their collective memories, a quiet chorus of 1,000 silent voices, forever embedded in their very being, then imagine for a moment what story might be groaning from the depths beneath them. For below that grand, glorious arena floor, far from the cheering throngs and the gilded emperor's box, lay a world unseen, a dark heart pulsing with a very different kind of life, a life of shadow, of sweat, of growls and whispers, and the chilling clank of iron. Picture this, folks. After the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with the fiery colors of a Roman triumph, and the last drunken reveler stumbled out into the cool night air, leaving the vast amphitheater to the shadows and the ghosts, there was another empire at work, an empire of stagehands, of animal handlers, of desperate men and restless beasts, all toiling in a realm called the Hypogeum. It wasn't just a basement, no sir, not by a long shot. It was a labyrinth, deep and intricate, a subterranean city of tunnels, chambers, and ingenious mechanisms, all built with a singular, terrifying purpose: to fuel the spectacle above. If you'd been a new recruit, lowered down into that gloom for the first time, your heart would have been hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. The air down there was thick, a cloying mix of damp earth, animal musk, torch smoke, and the faint, unmistakable tang of fear. It clung to you, burrowed into your clothes, and made the hair on the back of your neck stand up straight. This wasn't the clean, open air of the arena. This was a place of confined spaces, of echoing stone walls that seemed to absorb every scrap of light, leaving only the barest flicker from oil lamps carried by scuttling figures. Imagine a vast honeycomb structure carved out of the very earth, stretching for acres beneath the arena floor. Tunnels snaked off in every direction, twisting and turning, some wide enough for a team of oxen, others barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. And within these tunnels, the real work began. Think of it, dozens, sometimes hundreds of cages hidden in the shadows. Not pretty little bird cages, mind you, but stout iron and timber contraptions designed to hold the most formidable creatures the known world could offer. Lions from Africa, bears from the European forests, tigers from the Far East, even crocodiles from the Nile. Their eyes, like smoldering coals in the gloom, would watch you pass. Their growls, low and guttural, would vibrate through the stone, a constant, unsettling hum beneath the roar of the crowd above, a hum that promised teeth and claws and raw, untamed fury. And then there were the lifts. Oh, those lifts were a marvel of Roman engineering and a chilling testament to their ingenuity. Imagine sturdy wooden platforms, some small enough for a single gladiator, others large enough for a wild animal cage, connected by ropes and pulleys to powerful winches. Teams of burly slaves would strain at these winches, hauling tons of weight upwards, bringing man and beast alike to the arena floor as if by magic. One moment, a lion would be pacing in a dark cage below, its breath steaming in the cool, damp air. The next, with a creak and a groan of protesting timbers, it would burst into the blinding sunlight of the arena, to the delight and terror of thousands. For the gladiators, the Hypogeum was their purgatory. They waited in small, cramped holding cells, the smell of fear heavy in the air, the distant roar of the crowd above a constant, mocking reminder of their impending fate. They heard the growls of the beasts, the shouted commands of the handlers, the rhythmic thump of their own heart. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe. Every whisper in the tunnels seemed to carry a hidden message of doom. They were unseen, unheard, yet absolutely vital to the grand spectacle. Their anticipation, their dread, their final desperate prayers, all hung in the thick air of the Hypogeum, soaking into the very stones that held them. It was here, in this vast, unseen underworld, that the true secrets of the Colosseum lay. Not just architectural marvels, but the secrets of human manipulation, of creating illusions, of turning raw power and raw fear into public entertainment. It was the hidden engine of an empire, a dark, beating heart that was never meant to be seen, only felt in the gut-wrenching thrill of the arena. And if you listen real close, even now, with that part of you that feels ancient things, you might just catch the echo of that ceaseless activity, the phantom creak of a lift, the imagined snarl of a beast, or the whispered final prayer of a man, all still resonating from the deep, dark labyrinth below. It's a symphony of shadows and fear, still playing in the dark, waiting for someone to truly listen. Now, that symphony of shadows and fear, still playing in the dark below, well, it wasn't the only performance the Colosseum had up its sleeve. You see, those Romans, they didn't just understand how to build for earth and stone. They understood the very elements themselves and how to bend them to their will. It wasn't enough for them to have gladiators battling beasts on dry, blood-soaked sand. Oh no, that was just one act in their grand, terrifying theater. Imagine, if you will, the roar of the crowd, the dust settling after a particularly brutal bout, the scent of iron and sweat heavy in the air. The emperor gives a nod, a signal so subtle only those in the know would catch it. And then, slowly, wondrously, the very stage begins to change. The sand, which had just moments ago absorbed the lifeblood of men and beasts, would begin to shimmer. Not with the heat of the sun, but with something else entirely. A low, gurgling sound would start, faint at first, then growing, echoing up from the dark passages below. A sound like the earth itself was taking a deep, long drink. And then, before the eyes of 50,000 screaming spectators, the arena floor would transform. From countless unseen sluices and drains, water, clear and cool, would begin to seep. It wasn't a trickle, it was a deluge. Fed by ancient aqueducts, those magnificent rivers of stone that brought fresh mountain water to Rome, the Colosseum could become, in a matter of hours, a vast, shimmering lake. A temporary ocean right there in the heart of the city, reflecting the fierce Roman sun and the astonished faces of the crowd. This wasn't just a fancy trick, mind you. This was another testament to their mastery, another secret whispered through the stones. They called these spectacles naumachia, or naval battles. Little wooden ships, sometimes complete with miniature forts and sails, would be launched onto this artificial sea. Men, often condemned criminals or prisoners of war, would reenact famous sea battles, complete with clashing oars, grappling hooks, and mock warfare played out on the water, where earlier gladiators had fought on land. The illusion was complete, the transformation breathtaking. One moment, a desert of death, the next, a sparkling lake of watery warfare. Think about the sheer audacity of it, the engineering prowess required to not only flood such an enormous space, but to drain it again with relative speed, so that the next morning's events, perhaps a chariot race or another hunt, could proceed without delay. Miles of hidden pipes, cunningly designed valves, and a system of drains so efficient they could carry off millions of gallons of water, plunging it back into the city's vast sewer system, or perhaps even channeling it for irrigation. It was a watery dance of power, an incredible feat that speaks not just of their building skill, but of their profound understanding of hydraulics, of gravity, of the very flow of nature. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of secrets were whispered by that water as it rushed through the bowels of the Colosseum? Did it carry echoes of the battle that had just raged on its surface, or the lingering fear of the men who fought there? Did the stones themselves remember the sensation of being utterly submerged, then slowly drying, only to be soaked again? This wasn't just about entertainment, mind you. This was another testament to their mastery,
another secret whispered through the stones. They called these spectacles naumachia, or naval battles. Little wooden ships, sometimes complete with miniature forts and sails, would be launched onto this artificial sea. Men, often condemned criminals or prisoners of war, would reenact famous sea battles, complete with clashing oars, grappling hooks, and mock warfare played out on the water, where earlier gladiators had fought on land. The illusion was complete, the transformation breathtaking. One moment, a desert of death; the next, a sparkling lake of watery warfare. Think about the sheer audacity of it, the engineering prowess required to not only flood such an enormous space, but to drain it again with relative speed, so that the next morning's events, perhaps a chariot race or another hunt, could proceed without delay. Miles of hidden pipes, cunningly designed valves, and a system of drains so efficient they could carry off millions of gallons of water, plunging it back into the city's vast sewer system, or perhaps even channeling it for irrigation. It was a watery dance of power, an incredible feat that speaks not just of their building skill, but of their profound understanding of hydraulics, of gravity, of the very flow of nature. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of secrets were whispered by that water as it rushed through the bowels of the Colosseum? Did it carry echoes of the battle that had just raged on its surface, or the lingering fear of the men who fought there? Did the stones themselves remember the sensation of being utterly submerged, then slowly drying, only to be soaked again? This wasn't just about entertainment, mind you. This was about demonstrating absolute control, the ability to reshape reality itself for the amusement and awe of the masses. It was another layer of that deep, dark magic, that human manipulation that made an empire hum. And as that water drained away, gurgling and sighing into the darkness below, it carried with it not just the debris of the latest spectacle, but perhaps the whispered secrets of an empire that could do anything, even conjure an ocean in the middle of a city, and then make it disappear, leaving behind only the memory and a floor ready for the next breathtaking, terrifying act.
The last gurgle of water would fade, the massive pumps having done their job, leaving behind not a pristine stage, but a damp, sandy floor, slick with the recent memory of an artificial sea. And just as quickly as the ocean vanished, the stagehands, thousands of them, bustling like ants with a purpose, would descend. Planks would be laid, sand freshly spread, and massive, intricate sets, painted with a realism that would fool a modern eye, would rise from the trapdoors beneath. Trees, mountains, even entire miniature villages, all constructed with a dizzying speed that defied logic. The Colosseum, folks, wasn't just an arena. It was the world's most advanced, most brutal, and most spectacular theater, capable of transforming its identity faster than a magician changes suits. Then came the crowd. Oh, the crowd. Imagine, if you will, the hush that precedes the breaking of a storm. A tension so thick you could carve it with a gladius. 50,000 souls, packed shoulder to shoulder, from the emperor himself, enthroned in marble and purple, down to the lowliest plebeian clutching their meager bread, all fixated on that one oval of destiny below. The air would crackle, not just with anticipation, but with the combined breath, sweat, and nervous energy of an entire city. A single blast of a brass trumpet, sharp and demanding, would slice through the stillness. And then it would hit you. The roar. Not a polite applause, not a stadium cheer for a ball game, but a primal, guttural explosion of sound. A sound that wasn't just heard with your ears, but felt in your very bones, vibrating up through the stone seats, rattling your teeth, making the hair on your arms stand on end. It was the collective voice of humanity, hungry for spectacle, hungry for drama, hungry for blood. The scent, too, would tell a story. Beneath the wafts of expensive perfume from the wealthy and the pungent sweat of the masses, there was the tang of iron, not quite blood yet, but the metallic promise of it. There was the earthy smell of fresh sand, mixed with the exotic, musky odors of caged beasts, restless and agitated in the dim tunnels beneath the arena floor. And, subtle but undeniable, the acrid hint of fear, a primal scent that clung to the air like a heavy shroud, especially in the moments leading up to the clash. Then the gladiators would emerge. Not just men, but figures carved from legend, their bodies honed, their armor gleaming, their faces often hidden behind elaborate helms, turning them into anonymous instruments of fate. They'd march, sometimes in defiant silence, sometimes with a showman's swagger, but always, always with an aura of solemnity, knowing what lay ahead. The crowd's roar would surge again, a deafening wave of approval and demand. The clang of steel on steel, the scrape of a trident on the sandy floor, the guttural cries of men locked in a dance of death, these weren't just noises. They were the punctuation marks of a brutal narrative, playing out under the scorching Roman sun. Every parry, every lunge, every desperate gasp was magnified by the sheer scale of the Colosseum, each movement observed by tens of thousands, their hopes and fears riding on the outcome. You could almost feel the phantom crunch of bone, hear the ghostly whistle of a spear as it found its mark. And when a victor stood triumphant, or when a defeated warrior knelt, awaiting the thumbs up or thumbs down of the emperor, the silence would return. A different kind of silence this time, heavy and breathless, thick with anticipation and the raw, unblinking awareness of life and death hanging by a thread. Then the decision, and another explosion of sound, joy for the living or a final, chilling shout for the fallen. The scent, too, wasn't just a show. It was a ritual, a profound, unsettling communion between the powerful and the powerless, the living and the soon-to-be dead. The Colosseum wasn't merely a backdrop. It was an active participant, its immense structure drinking in every sound, every emotion, every drop of blood. It absorbed the thunderous approval, the collective gasp of horror, the murmuring prayers, the screams of anguish. It became a vessel for all that human experience, a colossal monument built not just of stone and mortar, but of memory, fear, and an insatiable hunger for spectacle. As the sun began to dip, painting the upper tiers in hues of orange and purple, the last act would conclude. The bodies would be dragged away, the sand raked smooth, and the crowd would begin its slow, buzzing dispersal, carrying the echoes of the day's events back into the city. But some things, some imprints, didn't leave. The stones themselves, those ancient, enduring witnesses, kept hold of it all. The phantom roar, the ghostly clang of steel, the almost imperceptible scent of dust and fear, they lingered in the vast, empty spaces. They clung to the rough-hewn blocks, whispering secrets to the wind, waiting for someone, something, to listen. The magic of this place wasn't just in its construction, it was in its memory, a living, breathing specter of a spectacle that refused to truly fade. And those whispers, subtle as they were starting to grow a little clearer, a little more insistent, waiting for the right ear to finally catch their story. The air inside the Colosseum, even on the brightest Roman afternoon, always held a certain stillness, a quiet breathlessness that felt ancient and knowing. But after those whispers from the stones began to grow, subtle at first, then a little more insistent, that stillness started to feel less like quiet and more like a held breath. It was as if the very air was thick with unseen presence, waiting for someone, something, to truly hear. And as the twilight crept in, painting the ruins in hues of rust and bruised violet, it felt like the stones themselves leaned in, eager to share their ancient burdens. For those who truly listened, with not just their ears, but with a deep, open heart, the silence wasn't empty. Oh no. It was a vast, echoing chamber, brimming with stories that had been pressed into the mortar and etched into the weathered blocks over centuries. It started with a low hum, a feeling more than a sound, emanating from the earth beneath your feet. a deep, resonant thrum that spoke of immense effort, of countless footsteps, of 1,000 hearts beating in unison. Then, if you closed your eyes and let the imagination take the reins, the scent of dust and fear, so fleeting before, grew sharper. It mingled with something else, the metallic tang of old blood, the musky odor of wild beasts, and the faint, almost imperceptible sweetness of incense offered to forgotten gods in hopes of mercy or victory. This wasn't just history from a book. This was history breathing down your neck, whispering into your soul. You could almost feel the rough, damp earth of the subterranean passages, the hypogeum, where the gladiators and the animals waited in the echoing dark. Imagine them there, these men and women, for some women, known as gladiatrices, also fought, stripped bare of everything but their courage and their will to survive. Slaves, prisoners of war, even free citizens seeking fame or fortune, all sharing the same chilling anticipation. Their muscles tense, their hearts a frantic drum against their ribs. They would listen to the roars and cries from above, knowing their turn was next. You could almost see the flicker of lamplight on their faces, edged with fear, determination, and sometimes a quiet resignation. A young Thracian warrior, his distinctive curved sword heavy in his hand, might trace the symbol of his homeland in the dirt, a silent prayer to a god miles away. Nearby, a grizzled retiarius, net and trident at the ready, would practice a quick, fluid lunge in the tight confines, his eyes hardened by a dozen previous contests. Their lives, for however long they lasted, were a brutal, captivating dance, choreographed by emperors and perfected by desperation. Each clang of steel against shield, each grunt of effort, each roar of the crowd was absorbed by these very walls, vibrating through the vast structure like a tuning fork. And the beasts, oh, the beasts. Lions with manes like fiery sunsets, leopards with eyes like molten gold, bears from the dark forests of Germania, even crocodiles from the Nile. They were dragged from distant lands, confined in dark cages, their wildness exploited for the amusement of thousands. You could feel their primal power, their frustrated fury, echoing up from the depths. The deep, guttural growl of a lion, stretching its massive paws in a cramped cage, the panicked whinny of a wild horse, the slithering hiss of a serpent. These weren't just sounds from the past. They felt like immediate vibrations in the very air. They too were part of the spectacle, innocent participants in a bloody ballet, their strength and ferocity a stark contrast to their ultimate fate. It was in these moments, as the boundaries between past and present blurred, that a new understanding began to dawn. The Colosseum wasn't just a collection of stone and mortar, a feat of engineering, or a monument to a forgotten empire. It was a colossal sponge, an immense memory keeper. Every desperate breath, every triumphant shout, every silent prayer offered by a gladiator staring death in the face, every furious roar of a captured beast, it had all soaked into the very fabric of the building. The genius of its architecture wasn't just in its ability to stand for millennia, but in its capacity to preserve, to hold, to echo the very essence of the human and animal dramas that unfolded within its massive embrace. The whispers, once faint, now felt like a chorus, building into a symphony of courage and sorrow. And as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, casting the Colosseum in deep, impenetrable shadows, you couldn't help but feel that these ancient echoes weren't just reflections of the past. They were a living part of the present, a warning, a lament, and perhaps a clue. A clue to a secret woven into the very structure, a secret that transcended mere stone and mortar, speaking of something deeper, something eternal, waiting to be fully revealed. And in that intensified silence, laden with the weight of centuries, it felt like the Colosseum was finally ready to tell its deepest, most guarded story. That profound, almost physical silence, born of centuries of untold stories, felt like a deep breath the Colosseum was holding, gathering its ancient strength. And in that breath, as the last fiery streaks of sunset vanished, a new kind of darkness began to creep in. But it wasn't the impenetrable, crushing dark of night just yet. No, before that, a different kind of shadow play came to mind. A daily ritual that had once been as spectacular and vital as any gladiatorial contest. You see, for all the blood and thunder, for all the roaring crowds and the beasts from distant lands, the Roman sun could be a brutal mistress. Imagine sitting for hours, baked by the Italian heat, squinting against the glare as elephants paraded or gladiators clashed. That wouldn't do for the comfort of the populace, not for the emperor, and certainly not for the drama unfolding below. So, the Romans, with their unparalleled knack for making the impossible merely difficult, devised a solution that would still make modern engineers scratch their heads in admiration: the velarium. Now, picture it with me. High above, spanning the entire colossal ellipse, a canvas awning so vast it could dwarf a dozen modern football fields. It wasn't just a simple sheet. Oh no. This was a sophisticated, retractable system of sails, unfurling and retracting like a giant, meticulously choreographed marine ballet. They called it the velarium, and its very name whispered of ships and sails. And indeed, it was sailors, often veteran mariners from the naval base at Misenum, who were tasked with its intricate operation. From the highest reaches of the Colosseum, from sturdy masts that protruded from the top edge, ropes as thick as a man's arm stretched, crisscrossing the sky. These ropes were threaded through thousands of pulleys, pulled and released by a small army of experienced hands. It must have been a sight to behold. 100 or more sailors, their calloused hands working in rhythmic unison, their shouts echoing as they wrestled with the immense fabric. Bit by bit, with the groaning of timbers and the creaking of ropes, the colossal canvas would begin to spread, a colossal white cloud slowly eclipsing the sun. And as it did, a cool, gentle shadow would cascade down, bathing the marble tiers, softening the harsh edges of the arena floor. It wasn't just about comfort, though that was a huge part of it. The velarium transformed the entire experience. It changed the light, made the colors of the gladiators' tunics pop, and gave the entire spectacle a theatrical, almost otherworldly glow. The sounds, too, were subtly altered. The roar of the crowd, instead of dissipating into the vast sky, would bounce and resonate, creating a more intimate, intense acoustic. But here's where the whispers in the dark begin to take on a new resonance. For these weren't just static shadows. As the sun moved, and as the breeze caught the vast canvas, the patterns of light and dark would shift, dance, and morph across the arena floor, across the faces of the spectators, even across the very stone. Imagine the plays of light, like ghostly fingers reaching and receding, revealing and then concealing, painting transient mysteries on the sand. A gladiator might step from blinding sun into sudden cool darkness. A lion might stalk, momentarily lost in a swirling patch of gloom. Could these moving shadows have been more than just atmospheric effects? Could they have been used to create illusions, to disorient combatants, or perhaps to hide something? The vastness of the system, its sheer ingenuity, felt like another layer of the Colosseum's profound secrecy. It wasn't just stone and mortar that held its truths. It was the very air, the light, the shadows themselves. And as you stood there, sensing the sheer scale of that invisible canopy, you couldn't help but wonder about the secrets that had unfolded beneath its shifting gaze. What did those shadows obscure? What silent signals might have been passed? What desperate plots hatched? What crucial clues were swallowed by the sudden gloom cast by those colossal sails? The velarium, a testament to Roman genius,
was also a master of illusion, a painter of temporary darkness, a silent accomplice to all the dramas, both public and profoundly private, that had played out on the stage of the Colosseum. It made you realize that the secrets weren't just etched in the stones. They were woven into the very fabric of the air, the light, and the breathtaking, eerie dance of the shadows themselves.
If the Valerium was a master of illusion, painting temporary darkness over the grand stage, then beneath its fleeting embrace lay a whole other world of shadows, permanent ones, carved into the very stone of the Colosseum itself. You see, the grandeur that met the Roman public's eye, the roaring crowds and spectacular shows, was only one side of the coin. Behind every triumphant gladiator and every awe-inspiring beast lay a meticulously orchestrated ballet of unseen effort, a labyrinth of hidden lives and hushed movements that kept the colossal entertainment machine churning. Imagine, if you will, stepping through a doorway, barely noticed by the cheering thousands, and finding yourself in a different universe altogether. The deafening roar of the crowd would instantly soften to a distant hum, swallowed by thick stone walls. Here, the air would be cooler, perhaps carrying the damp scent of ancient earth and unwashed cloth, a stark contrast to the sun-baked dust of the arena floor. You'd be standing in one of the Colosseum's countless forgotten passages, a network of dimly lit corridors, spiraling stairwells, and hidden chambers that snaked beneath the tiers and around the perimeter like the roots of a colossal ancient tree. These weren't paths for the casual spectator. Oh no, these were the veins and arteries of the beast, pulsing with purpose. This was where priests in their solemn robes moved with quiet dignity to prepare for opening ceremonies, their hushed blessings echoing off stone. This was where guards, their heavy sandals making little sound on the worn floor, patrolled with watchful eyes, their bronze helmets catching the flickers of torchlight from niches in the walls. They were not just protecting the populace, they were maintaining order in a place where chaos was always a breath away, ensuring the smooth transition of spectacles and guarding secrets far more profound than the gladiators' tactics. And then there were the attendants, the countless hands that kept everything running. They scurried through these subterranean pathways laden with supplies, carrying refreshments to private boxes, ferrying messages from dignitaries, or perhaps even delivering a whispered command from the emperor's inner circle. You might have seen stagehands, their faces smudged with dust and sweat, maneuvering massive props, or the skilled engineers checking the complex mechanisms of the lifts that brought animals and fighters dramatically into the arena. Their lives were spent in perpetual motion, in the shadows, their vital work often unacknowledged, yet without them, the entire spectacle would have crumbled. But perhaps the most poignant figures in these hidden depths were the gladiators themselves, not yet in the roar of the arena, but here, in cramped waiting rooms just off the main passages, their armor being buffed, their weapons checked. Imagine the quiet tension, the deep breaths, the silent prayers offered to forgotten gods. What kind of words were exchanged in those moments? Promises? Threats? Farewells? The air in those hidden chambers must have thrummed with raw emotion, with the unspoken fears and fierce hopes of men facing their fate. The faint smell of blood and sweat from previous contests would cling to the stone, a grim reminder of what awaited them just beyond the threshold. And then there were the attendants, the countless hands that kept everything running. They scurried through these subterranean pathways, laden with supplies, carrying refreshments to private boxes, ferrying messages from dignitaries, or perhaps even delivering a whispered command from the emperor's inner circle. You might have seen stagehands, their faces smudged with dust and sweat, maneuvering massive props, or the skilled engineers checking the complex mechanisms of the lifts that brought animals and fighters dramatically into the arena.
Their lives were spent in perpetual motion, in the shadows, their vital work often unacknowledged, yet without them, the entire spectacle would have crumbled. But perhaps the most poignant figures in these hidden depths were the gladiators themselves, not yet in the roar of the arena, but here, in cramped waiting rooms just off the main passages, their armor being buffed, their weapons checked. Imagine the quiet tension, the deep breaths, the silent prayers offered to forgotten gods. What kind of words were exchanged in those moments? Promises, threats, farewells? The air in those hidden chambers must have thrummed with raw emotion, with the unspoken fears and fierce hopes of men facing their fate. The faint smell of blood and sweat from previous contests would cling to the stone, a grim reminder of what awaited them just beyond the threshold. And it wasn't just below the arena. Beyond the grand imperial box, which we've glimpsed before, were other, less obvious private chambers for senators, Vestal virgins, and other powerful Roman figures. These weren't just seats for viewing, they were miniature fortresses of power, often with their own private entrances and exits, allowing for discreet arrivals and departures. What conversations, you might wonder, happened in the hushed intimacy of these boxes? Agreements sealed with a nod, rivalries subtly acknowledged, perhaps even plots whispered under the guise of casual conversation, all while the din of the Colosseum offered perfect cover. The walls, it felt, had ears, and the stones themselves bore witness to 1,000 untold stories. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what might have been passed through these secret routes? Not just people and provisions, but information, whispers, clues. What if a coded message, vital to the fate of Rome, was tucked into a guard's belt in one of these very passages? What if a significant artifact, something ancient and powerful, was once hidden away in a forgotten nook of these operational areas, placed there by hands long turned to dust? The Colosseum wasn't just a stage for public drama, it was a silent accomplice to countless private ones, a keeper of secrets that lay just beyond the reach of the common eye. The echoes in these forgotten passages don't just carry the ghosts of hurried footsteps or the phantom clang of a gladiator's sword. They carry a longing to reveal what they witnessed, a yearning for someone, perhaps even you, to piece together the fragments of an ancient unsolved riddle. It's as if the stones themselves are trying to tell you something, a story they've held captive for 2 millennia, waiting for just the right ear to listen to the whispers of its forgotten past. And as you sense the weight of those unspoken tales, a peculiar chill might creep up your spine, a feeling that something precious, something profoundly important, still lies buried within these intricate, unseen workings, waiting for its moment to emerge into the light.
Those whispers, those ancient secrets that clung to the damp, forgotten passages, didn't just vanish when the roar of the crowds died out. No, sir. They settled deeper, burrowing into the very marrow of the arena as the world outside began to forget its name, or at least forget its purpose. Because the Roman Empire, for all its might and splendor, was like any living thing. It had its sunrise, its high noon, and then, inevitably, its twilight. And when that twilight deepened into an endless night, the Colosseum, this magnificent stage for human drama, found itself caught in the merciless swing of time's relentless scythe. It wasn't a sudden fall, mind you. Empires don't just tumble like a stack of blocks. They crumble, slow and agonizing, like an old oak struck by lightning, shedding its branches one by one until only the gnarled trunk remains. And with each crumbling piece of imperial power, the Colosseum shed a bit of its glory. The emperors who built it were gone, replaced by lesser men, and then by no men at all who truly cared for its original grandeur. The games ceased. The gladiators, the beasts, the emperors, the Vestal virgins, they all melted away into the mist of history, leaving the colossal structure standing silent, a hollow echo of its former self. Imagine it, if you will. The great bronze gates, once polished to a gleaming sheen, now tarnished and sagging on their hinges. Weeds pushing their tenacious roots through cracks in the marble steps where senators once strode with pride. The arena floor, once meticulously raked and covered in fresh sand, now overgrown with scrub grass, home to scurrying lizards and the occasional wild dog. The ghosts of ambition and terror still lingered, of course, a phantom chill in the air, but they were alone now, their audience gone. What happened next wasn't pretty, but it was, in its own way, a testament to the Colosseum's enduring strength. People, desperate folks in a failing age, looked at the mighty structure not with awe, but with practicality. Here was a mountain of cut stone, already shaped, already available. So they started to chip away. Piece by piece, stone by stone, the Colosseum became its own quarry. Marble facings, once dazzling white, were stripped to adorn new churches or humble homes. The metal clamps that held the massive blocks together, precious in their own right, were melted down for weapons or tools. It was a slow, systematic dismantling, like watching a giant wake up each morning and surrender a limb. For centuries, it served as Rome's personal hardware store. Its elegant arches, designed to funnel thousands of cheering spectators, were bricked up and repurposed. Some became fortresses, their sturdy walls offering protection in an age of constant threat. Imagine a feudal lord setting up shop in one of the grand arcades, his banner fluttering from a battlement where statues of gods once stood. Others, perhaps more surprisingly, became humble dwellings. Families took shelter within its ancient embrace, building fires against its aged brickwork, hanging laundry from lines strung between broken columns. The roaring beast of Rome transformed into a quiet village, its upper tiers gazing down, like silent, stony eyes, at the domestic dramas unfolding below. Earthquakes, too, played their part. The ground beneath Rome has always had a rumble to it, and more than once the earth shook with a violence that sent sections of the mighty edifice tumbling. Huge chunks of the outer ring collapsed, adding to the piles of rubble that accumulated at its feet. The sleeping giant was being battered, wounded, losing its shape. Yet somehow it never truly fell. It just hunkered down, a monumental testament to resilience, enduring the battering of both man and nature. And all this time, through the plunder and the earthquakes, the neglect and the repurposing, those deepest secrets, the ones whispered in the dark, intricate tunnels beneath the arena floor, the ones about that peculiar chill and the sense of something precious yet hidden, they remained, untouched, unseen. The very chaos of its decline, the sheer bulk of its ruin, inadvertently protected them. Who would think to dig deep into the debris-choked substructures of a crumbling quarry? Who would imagine that the forgotten crypts of a gladiatorial arena held anything but dust and forgotten bones? The Colosseum was not merely surviving, it was waiting. It had been put to sleep, a titan in repose, dreaming ancient dreams while the world changed around it. It was a silent guardian, a scarred sentinel, holding on to its untold narratives and its hidden truths, biding its time. Because every sleeping giant eventually awakens, and the fragments of that ancient, unsolved riddle deep within its stony heart were simply gathering strength, waiting for the right moment and the right ear to emerge once more into the light. And as the city of Rome slowly rebuilt itself, layer upon layer, the Colosseum remained, a constant, weathered reminder of what once was, and a looming question mark for what still might be found within its magnificent, mysterious shell. You see, for all its slumbering silence, a place like the Colosseum doesn't just sit there gathering dust. Oh no, it breathes, it dreams. And sometimes, when the Roman moon hangs fat and low over its ancient broken arches, it remembers. And when a place remembers as much sorrow and triumph, as much blood and thunder as the Colosseum, those memories ain't always quiet little whispers. Sometimes they stir.
And sometimes, friend, they send a shiver right down to your very bones. Folks around Rome, the ones who've lived here long enough to see more than just the postcard perfect sights, they'll tell you tales. Old women knitting by their windows, street sweepers at dawn, night watchmen whose grandfathers guarded these very stones, they all know the stories. They talk about the ghosts. Not your sheet-wearing boo kind of ghosts, mind you. No, these are echoes, imprints left by centuries of raw human emotion. They say that deep in the hypogeum, in the labyrinthine tunnels where gladiators once waited, their hearts hammering a frantic drum against their ribs, you can still hear them. A faint, almost imperceptible clinking of unseen armor. The whisper of sand-worn leather brushing against stone. And on nights when the air is still and heavy, if you listen real hard, you might just catch the ragged intake of a breath, or the soft, defeated groan of a man facing his final sunrise. The phantom gladiators, they call them, not malicious, not vengeful, but tethered. Tethered to the spot where their courage was tested, where their fate was sealed. They pace, restless and eternal, an endless loop of anticipation and dread. Imagine standing there in the cool, damp darkness and feeling a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature, a prickling sensation on your skin, as if an invisible presence has just moved past you, leaving a trail of ancient despair. It's enough to make the bravest soul hurry up those steps, I tell ya. And then there are the beasts. Ah, those poor, magnificent creatures, brought from the far corners of the empire, confused and terrified, thrust into a world of roaring crowds and gleaming steel. They say on truly desolate nights, when the wind howls through the upper tiers like a grieving spirit, you can hear them too. A low, guttural growl that seems to emanate from the very earth beneath your feet. A faint, mournful roar carried on the breeze. The sound of a lion or a bear longing for its distant jungle or forest instead of this dusty arena. It's a sound that ain't quite right, you know? Too real to be the wind, too faint to be anything alive. Just an echo, a memory of a wild heart broken on display. The Colosseum remembers their fear, their raw power, their final desperate struggle. It absorbs it all into its porous stones, into the very air that circulates within its colossal embrace. And sometimes those memories surge. They bubble up from the depths, through the broken masonry and the whispering cracks, manifesting as a chill, a scent of something ancient and metallic, or a sound that makes the hairs on your neck stand on end. It's more than just a spooky story to scare the kids around a campfire. It's the Colosseum itself trying to tell us something. It's the weight of 2,000 years pressing down, a testament to lives lived and lost, to secrets whispered and buried. The unsolved riddle isn't just a puzzle etched in stone. It's woven into the very fabric of these spectral phenomena. These lingering presences, these faint echoes, they're not just remnants of the past. They're part of the untold narratives, the hidden truths the sleeping giant has been holding on to. And as the world outside continues its relentless march, changing and forgetting, the Colosseum remains, an undeniable, spectral reminder that some stories, some questions, simply refuse to fade away. It's almost as if these restless spirits, these memories stirred, are waiting for someone, anyone, to finally listen closely enough to understand what they've been trying to say all along.
The previous night's whispers, the lingering chill in the air from tales of spectral crowds and echoes, often faded with the dawn. But for Dr. Eris Thorne, a man whose hands knew the feel of ancient dust better than his own pillow, the morning light simply cast new shadows, inviting new questions. He wasn't one for ghost stories, not in the traditional sense, but he understood the restless energy of history, the way forgotten lives could imprint themselves upon a place, waiting for someone to finally read the ancient script. His team, a small band of dedicated souls from across the globe, moved like spirits themselves in the early hours, their headlamps carving paths through the still dark hypogeum. They weren't hunting specters, not with net and camera anyway. They were chasing something just as elusive, truth, etched in crumbling mortar and buried bone. With trowels and brushes, not grand pronouncements, they peeled back the millennia, layer by painstaking layer. It was a slow dance with eternity, each movement careful, each discovery a hushed conversation with the past. Just last season, down in a forgotten alcove beneath what was once the Emperor's box, they'd found something extraordinary. Not a chest of gold, mind you, something far more precious to an archaeologist. A series of finely carved wooden gears, miraculously preserved in the dry earth, along with fragments of heavy ropes and a corroded iron counterweight. It was a clear, undeniable piece of the puzzle concerning the massive animal lifts, not just how they worked, but the incredible precision and mechanical genius involved. These weren't crude mechanisms, they were sophisticated machines, engineered with a foresight that still baffled modern minds. The unsolved riddle of the Colosseum's rapid transformations during spectacles began to yield its secrets, not through a supernatural whisper, but through the patient, quiet work of scientific deduction. Each shard of pottery, each carefully documented tool, each grain of meticulously sifted soil told a story. It was the story of the nameless engineers whose minds conjured these marvels, of the enslaved workers whose sweat and muscle built them, of the forgotten gladiators who faced their fate on the sand above. They found ancient graffiti, not the romanticized etchings of poets, but simple, crude drawings from long-dead workers, a doodle of a lion, a tally mark, a name scrawled in the fleeting hope of remembrance. These weren't just dusty relics, they were the very voices of the past, finally breaking their 2,000-year silence, speaking not of grand emperors, but of ordinary lives caught in the Colosseum's immense shadow. It was humbling, Dr. Thorne often thought, to stand on ground where so much life and death had played out, and to know that beneath your feet countless narratives still lie sleeping. The earth itself was a library, and their job was to turn its pages with the utmost care, ensuring no story was lost, no voice unheard. The eerie sense of lingering presence wasn't just imagination. It was the tangible weight of these countless forgotten lives, now slowly, carefully, being brought back into the light. Then came the seismic readings. Dr. Thorne had been poring over them for weeks, a frown etched deeper into his brow with each passing day. The anomalies weren't just anomalies, they were consistent, suggesting a chamber deeper than any previously known, directly beneath the Colosseum's exact center. Not a passage, not a storage room, a chamber, something substantial, something hidden, and it was old. Older, perhaps, than the Colosseum itself. There was a profound hush that fell over the site the day they started to drill, not with the destructive force of a construction crew, but with the delicate precision of a surgeon. Not a nervous silence, but one of profound respect, as if the ancient stones themselves held their breath. It was the thrill of the unknown, the tantalizing whisper of discovery that made the hair on your arm stand up, not fear. It was the feeling of being on the precipice of understanding a secret that had been guarded for centuries, a secret that might finally explain the true heart of this sleeping giant, offering a different kind of answer to those restless spirits. And as the drill bit slowly, patiently, chewed its way through layers of earth and compressed rubble, a new chapter of the Colosseum story was about to be unwritten, piece by painstaking piece. And so the quiet drill, a modern marvel respecting an ancient giant, chewed its way through layers of compacted earth and forgotten stone.
The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that makes your stomach flutter and your ears strain for the smallest sound. It wasn't a destructive rumble, mind you, but a slow, almost reverent hum that vibrated through the very soles of your feet. Each rotation felt like a heartbeat, counting down to something profound, something that had been patiently waiting for centuries beneath the world's most famous amphitheater. Then it happened. Not with a crash or a sudden burst, but a subtle shift. The drill's pitch changed, a high, almost ethereal whine as it met no resistance. The pressure gauge dropped. The ground below us, which had felt solid as a Roman conviction, simply opened. The team, led by Dr. Anya Sharma, the quiet archaeologist with eyes that missed nothing, froze. The silence that followed was heavier than any stone in the Colosseum, a truly breathless hush. With careful, almost trembling hands, they retracted the drill. A camera, specially designed for deep boreholes, was lowered into the newly opened space. On the monitor, a gasp rippled through the small group. What they saw wasn't treasure, not gold or jewels, nor was it a forgotten burial chamber. It was far stranger, far more ancient. Below the deepest, most central point of the arena floor, beneath the elaborate hypogeum, hidden from any original blueprint ever found, was a colossal, perfectly circular void. It was vast, so vast the camera's wide-angle lens struggled to capture its full scope. It descended, tapering subtly downward like an inverted dome, into absolute inky blackness. The walls, as far as the beam of the camera's light could reach, were smooth, perfectly carved from the solid bedrock, showing no tool marks, no seams. It was a single, flawless, silent well, stretching deeper than anyone could have imagined, into the very earth. There were no discernible entrances or exits, no visible mechanisms, just this impossible, perfect emptiness. This wasn't a room for storage, nor a hidden passage. It was a chamber of nothing, a grand, hollow heart. And yet, the hair on your arms stood up, not from fear, but from a profound sense of awe, as if you were peering into the very soul of the structure itself. It felt like the perfect resonator, a giant, silent drum designed to absorb the thunderous roars, the desperate cries, the clamor of crowds, the clash of steel, the very essence of human experience that had unfolded above it for centuries. Dr. Sharma, her face pale but alight with understanding, finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "It's a resonance chamber, or perhaps a collector. Not of sound, but of something else. Energy, emotion. It's what gives this place its voice, its eternal echo." It was a different kind of answer to the restless spirits, you see. Not literal ghosts, but the lingering vibrations of 1,000 years of intense human drama. The Colosseum wasn't haunted by individual souls, but by the sheer, accumulated force of life, death, agony, and glory, all channeled into this silent, invisible well beneath its foundations. It was designed to capture and hold the very feeling of Rome. The discovery sent shivers down the spine of every historian and engineer. This wasn't just a structural marvel, it was a psychological one, a testament to a Roman ingenuity so profound it touched upon the spiritual, creating a structure that didn't just host events, but absorbed them, making them part of its eternal being. And that, my friends, is where our tale truly ends, or rather, where it settles into its permanent mystery. Because while they found the heart, they never fully understood its full purpose, or how it was built with such impossible precision, deep beneath the ground, with no visible entry. It remains a testament to secrets whispered across millennia. The Colosseum stands today, as it always has, a defiant survivor against the ravages of time and man. Its crumbling arches whisper tales of gladiators and emperors, of wild beasts and roaring crowds, of ingenious engineering and brutal spectacle. It's a monument not just to the might of Rome, but to the intricate, often terrifying, sometimes glorious complexity of humanity itself. And now, knowing about that silent, colossal void beneath its beating heart, you can almost feel it. You can stand on the dusty arena floor, close your eyes, and listen. Listen not just for the wind whistling through the broken arches, but for the profound, ancient hum of accumulated history. The Colosseum breathes, you see. It remembers, it collects. And in that deep, hidden chamber, it holds a legacy far grander and far more mysterious than any mere collection of stones. It's a roar that never fades, a silent echo that will resonate through eternity. A secret whispered in the very bedrock of time, leaving you with that captivating, eerie feeling that some stories, like some structures, are meant to stand forever. Their deepest secrets forever, just out of reach, yet always, always felt.
Thank you for joining this peaceful journey through the echoes of the Colosseum. May the calm strength of its ancient stones stay with you, guiding you gently into rest. If you enjoyed this quiet walk through history, please remember to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a new nighttime tale. From all of us here at Twilight Tale, may your night be restful, your dreams peaceful, and your curiosity forever alive. Good night, traveler. Sleep well.